New details are emerging about the first devices in Apple's upcoming transition to their own custom chips, so, well, there's a lot to unpack. So let's get started. So I wasn't actually planning on making another video talking about Apple Silicon. We've kind of talked about it before when it was all kind of fresh in everyone's mind, and now we're essentially playing a waiting game. We have this vague deadline at the end of this year where we're saying, okay, well, at some point before December 31st, 2020, we'll see something, but we haven't really known anything about that. Now, I wasn't planning on making a video about this recent update. I'm a little bit late on this topic, admittedly, but the more I've been thinking about it, the more I kind of wanted to discuss it with you guys and also see what you think about it in the comments and over on Twitter. So follow me at Luke Miani. We'll be talking about it over there. This video is going to come out today, the same day that I'm filming it. I'm filming it on August 2nd, and that's when you're going to be watching it, most likely. So let's talk about it. Let's break it down. Okay, so here's the tweet that started all of this. It's talking about an upcoming ARM-based MacBook with an A14X, 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM, 256, 512, or 1 terabyte SSD, and some other things that we'll talk about, but the thing that catches everyone's eye is down at the bottom. 4th generation butterfly keyboard. Now, this is something that I've been afraid of for a little while. We've heard murmurs in recent weeks that Apple wasn't done with the butterfly keyboard, that the Magic Keyboard that they've been putting on their products was more of a temporary placeholder while they figure out how to make a butterfly keyboard work. And I don't know, I have pretty mixed feelings about this. Now there is a lot to be excited about here. For one, as I've been asking for years at this point, we have finally a glimmer of hope that Apple could reinvent the 12-inch MacBook, but make it actually work. The form factor and like the concept behind the 12-inch MacBook is really, really good. I love the idea of a portable Mac that's fully featured, but it's like, an actual full OS. That is a great idea, make no mistake. But Apple didn't really execute it very well. The one port, the really, really bad processors, and that's not necessarily their fault. Intel's really low-end Y-series processors just weren't and aren't very good. It also had the worst version of the butterfly keyboard really ever, and the reliability wasn't good. So it had some caveats, but as a concept, I think it's really solid. So if you were to put an A14X, which we could assume is going to be significantly more powerful than the already quite powerful A12X that you'll find in a 2-year-old iPad Pro, that would be an unbelievable machine. We're talking about a 12-inch MacBook that would very easily be able to tear through 4K footage. An A14X, even if you apply incremental improvements over the A12Z and the developer transition kit, that would be an absolute banger of a computer. And there's also the fact that this new revamped 12-inch MacBook will start at potentially $799. Now that, I think, is a game changer. For a little while now, Apple has been sort of struggling to get below the $1,000 mark. They used to actually sell the 11-inch MacBook Air at, I think that was $899. So they had that below $1,000 for 1 or 2 years. But since that one was discontinued, then they had the 2015 and 2017 MacBook Air was at $1,000, and then now we have the current generation MacBook Air is back at $1,000. But to have potentially a MacBook that is significantly more powerful than the MacBook Air and less expensive, that is a game changer. Hearing myself say that out loud, it does sound a little bit fanboyish. We're like, only $800. $800 is a lot of money. Let's not make any mistakes here, but to have an $800 MacBook that's not severely crippled or ancient, which the 11-inch MacBook Air kind of was a little bit when it was at that sub-$1,000 price point, that would be amazing. So now we get onto the rather inconvenient matter of the butterfly keyboard. So this is definitely going to be controversial because, as you know, we're talking about Apple here. We can't just have an $800 MacBook that's ridiculously powerful for the size and price and just, have it be good. You gotta throw in a little bit of a curveball there. This is Apple, so we gotta expect that. Not really something that any of us have wanted to see, but here's what I'm thinking. Here's where my mind is at this point. I, like a lot of you, have developed an aversion, almost a nervous tick when it comes to the butterfly keyboard. I don't like them. But realistically, when we're thinking of a butterfly keyboard, you're probably thinking of this, a 2017 MacBook Pro. This was sort of the apex of frustration at the butterfly keyboard. In 2018, they got a little bit better. In 2019, they got noticeably better, to the point where my 2019 MacBook Pro hasn't acted up. Now, I'm personally not a huge fan of the typing feel of at least the 2017 butterfly keyboards. The 2019 is honestly not bad to type on, but so here's what it comes down to. If Apple were to release a new generation butterfly keyboard, and let's say hypothetically, obviously it's way too early to tell, but hypothetically, if they were to completely solve the reliability issues of the butterfly keyboard, so no more need to get it replaced, no more keys sticking, somehow they do some wizardry and they fix that, and they increase the key travel slightly, not Magic Keyboard level, still using a butterfly switch, but it's a little bit more key travel. Would you be able to use that? I personally think that I could. Obviously, I wouldn't prefer it necessarily, depending on how it goes. If they make it feel amazing, then, whatever. If they make it a really good keyboard, then sure. But theoretically, if they were to just tweak it a little bit, fix the reliability, make it have a little bit more key travel, I think I might be able to forgive it. Now, I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about this because, obviously my thoughts are somewhat isolated. I'm gonna be buying whatever it is that Apple releases to test, but would a butterfly keyboard be a deal breaker? Would you avoid it, a butterfly keyboard, in any form? Or would you be able to look past it? Let me know in the comments below. Also, I'm gonna post a poll over on the community tab, and about half an hour ago, I put a poll up on Twitter. So we had 400 people vote. 35% said the benefits of the hypothetical 12-inch ARM MacBook are worth it, so they could overlook a butterfly keyboard. 19% said they don't care at all, and 46% say no way, screw butterfly. So that is actually quite interesting because that means that in theory, over 200 people would not buy an ARM MacBook if it had a butterfly keyboard, even with 15 to 20 hours of battery life, even with insane performance and really affordable pricing. So I think that's interesting. Obviously, this is too early. That's sort of a gut reaction that I'm sure many people would have upon learning that there's potentially going to be a new butterfly keyboard on the block. But the more that I think about it, the more I'm sort of withholding judgment. I just personally cannot see it being possible for Apple to release the butterfly keyboard that we already know. I don't think that they can do that. They basically already admitted that it sucks because they replaced it. So if they're gonna come out with another butterfly keyboard or another low profile, low key travel keyboard, it has to be different from whatever we've seen. Now let's set aside the butterfly keyboard for a moment and talk about the rest of that. Obviously there's some stuff that's great, some stuff that's not so great. 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM is kind of what you would expect. 256, 512, and 1 terabyte SSDs. Yeah, that's kind of what you would expect. A 720p FaceTime HD camera is, well, it's exactly what you would expect, and it's kind of a bummer. So all of that is pretty standard entry-level MacBook stuff. The thing that's going to be really interesting is the battery life. 15 to 20 hours of battery life, plus that A14X and all of the performance that would go along with that, and presumably this would also be a fanless device. That I think is actually really, really interesting. We're basically talking about an iPad Pro shaped like a MacBook with the whatever next gen processor and Mac OS and tons of battery life. Hell yeah, sign me up for that. Now, accompanying the rumor of this 12-inch MacBook revival, we also have word that there could be a 13-inch MacBook Pro with Apple Silicon coming out this year, sort of at the same event. Probably, if I had to guess, late October, back to the Mac style event, similar to what they did in 2016 when they introduced this generation of MacBook Pro. Probably something similar to that. So a 12-inch MacBook, a 13-inch MacBook Pro. The MacBook Pro is supposedly going to sort of carry in the likeness of what we currently have with, I would imagine, some design tweaks, and also starting price of $1099, which would be $200 less than what we currently have. Ho 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 ho! That is tasty. We were talking about back in June with the announcement of this transition how it's going to be so much cheaper for Apple to build MacBooks when they're building it with their own processors, because Intel charges ludicrous amounts of money for their processors. But the big question was, is Apple going to pass the cost savings to consumers, or are they just going to keep their pricing the same and eat that profit? And right now, it's starting to look like they might pass the savings down onto us. That would be really cool. There's also something else that could be going on here. So we've got this rumor that there's going to be a 12-inch MacBook and that there's going to be this 13-inch MacBook Pro with Apple Silicon with a lower starting price. But what about the 14-inch MacBook Pro that we're supposedly expecting? How does that factor into all of this? Well, here's a thought. What if you were to sort of take this 13-inch MacBook Pro, not do a ton of design changes to it? So sort of continuing the current generation, but putting new Apple Silicon processors in, lowering the price, get some good sales on it that way. And then later in 2021, introduce a new generation of MacBook Pro. So 14 and 16-inch with really thin bezels, sort of iPad Pro looking design with a curved display, put Face ID in it, really just go ham and make a new generation with a different higher tier of processors. That could be a move that Apple is pulling here. And that's not an unprecedented move. When you think back to the Intel transition, Apple didn't actually redesign a lot of the products that they transitioned from PowerPC to Intel. The Power Mac turned into the Mac Pro, which looked pretty much the same as before with a couple of minor tweaks and internal layout differences. The Intel iMac looks exactly the same as the PowerPC iMac. The Mac Mini didn't change at all. Then you had the PowerBook, which turned into the MacBook Pro, and it also looks the same. So it's possible that we could see the MacBook Pro basically just getting an internal swap over to Apple Silicon on the lower end models, and then later have a redesign similar to the way that Apple introduced the MacBook Pro with the same basic design as the PowerBook in 2006, and then it wasn't until 2008 that they redesigned it with the unibody MacBook Pro. Got a little bit off topic there, but the point is we now actually have some concept of what to expect. Now, granted, we don't really know what to expect in terms of design. It's possible that the 12-inch MacBook that comes out later this year, if that is actually going to happen, could end up looking basically the same as the 12-inch MacBook we already know, just with maybe thinner bezels and a reworked keyboard, kind of just keep that same design. I personally wouldn't have a problem with that design. I think it looks fine, but personally, I'm hoping that even if it's not this year, even if it's not with the first crop of Apple Silicon Macs, I'm hoping that we will see some really big paradigm shifts in the way Macs look. Heck, I'm starting to think that it's possible that Apple removes fans from all of their laptops. It seems ridiculous, I know, but crazier things have happened. Like, for example, bringing back the butterfly keyboard. What the heck? So those are the new developments in terms of Apple's switch to Apple Silicon, and it goes without saying, I've said this every time I talk about Apple Silicon, if you need a Mac right this very moment, buying used is a great option. We also have existing Intel Macs that are very solid. If you're looking at a high-end, like an iMac Pro or a Mac Pro or even a 16-inch MacBook Pro, I think you're probably going to be safe for a little while. But if you are looking to get on the Apple Silicon bandwagon, you got to be patient. So that's going to do it for today's video. As usual, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Luke Miani. Check out my subreddit in the description down below. And as usual, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. With that, I'll see you all in the next video.